As Oliver cruised down the empty highway, the darkness of the night enveloped his car like a shroud. The only sounds were the low hum of his engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. He had always found solace in late-night drives, the rhythmic motion of the road easing his troubled mind. But tonight, something felt different. A dense fog began to roll in, reducing visibility to a mere few feet ahead. Oliver squinted through the windshield, his heart rate quickening. He glanced at the dashboard clock. It read 2:37 a.m. He was hours away from his destination, and there was no turning back now. As he pressed on, the fog seemed to grow thicker, swirling around his car like ghostly tendrils. Oliver's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel, his nerves on edge. Suddenly, out of the mist, a figure appeared on the side of the road. It was a woman, her silhouette barely visible in the dim glow of his headlights. Oliver's breath caught in his throat as he slowed to a stop, his mind racing with uncertainty. Should he offer her a ride, or was it safer to keep driving? With a shaky hand, he rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" He called out into the night, his voice barely more than a whisper. The woman didn't respond, her form remaining eerily still. Oliver's pulse pounded in his ears as he debated his next move. But before he could make a decision, the figure vanished into the mist, leaving him alone once more. Shaken, Oliver swallowed hard and pressed down on the gas pedal, eager to put distance between himself and whatever haunted stretch of road he had stumbled upon. Little did he know, the night held far more terrors in store. As Oliver continued his journey, the fog refused to dissipate, clinging to the road like a sinister presence. His eyes darted nervously from side to side, searching for any sign of life in the desolate landscape. But all he saw was darkness. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the car as something slammed into the rear bumper. Oliver's heart leaped into his throat as he slammed on the brakes, his hands trembling with fear. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing behind him except the swirling mist. His mind raced with possibilities. Had he hit something? Or was it just his imagination playing tricks on him? With a shaky breath, Oliver stepped out of the car, his footsteps muffled by the thick fog. As he inspected the rear of his car, his blood ran cold. There, imprinted on the bumper, were two handprints, their fingers long and slender. Oliver's breath caught in his throat as he traced the outline of the prints, his mind reeling with disbelief. Before he could process what was happening, a cold gust of wind swept through the fog, extinguishing his headlights and plunging him into darkness. Panic surged through Oliver's veins as he fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking uncontrollably. But as he reached for the door handle, a voice cut through the silence, chilling him to the bone. "Leaving so soon, Oliver?" it whispered, its tone dripping with malice. Oliver froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew then that he was not alone on that desolate stretch of road, and as the fog closed in around him, he realized that some terrors were far worse than anything he could have imagined. Oliver's mind raced with fear as he stood frozen in the darkness, the voice lingering in the air like a sinister echo. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but he was paralyzed, unable to move. Seconds stretched into eternity as he waited, his breaths shallow and ragged. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the voice vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. With trembling hands, Oliver fumbled for his phone, the screen casting a feeble glow in the darkness. He dialed 911, his voice shaking as he relayed his location and the strange events that had unfolded. But as the dispatcher assured him that help was on the way, Oliver's gaze was drawn to the fog-shrouded road ahead. A figure emerged from the mist, its form indistinct yet undeniably human. Oliver's heart pounded in his chest as he watched, his mind consumed by dread. Was it the same woman from before, or something far more sinister? As the figure drew closer, Oliver's breath caught in his throat. It was her, the woman he had seen on the side of the road. But her appearance was different now, twisted and grotesque in the dim light. Panic surged through Oliver's veins as he stumbled backward, his foam slipping from his grasp. He turned to run, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. But it was too late. The woman was upon him, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. And as her icy fingers closed around his throat, Oliver realized with a sinking dread that some nightmares were all too real. With a surge of adrenaline, Oliver fought against the woman's grasp, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He clawed at her hands, desperation lending strength to his limbs. But her grip only tightened, her nails digging into his flesh like talons. In a final act of defiance, Oliver managed to break free, stumbling backward into the darkness. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his ears as he fled into the night. Every shadow seemed to reach out for him, every whisper of the wind a taunt. But Oliver refused to give in to fear. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs threatened to give out beneath him. And then, just when he thought he could go no further, he saw it, the faint glow of headlights in the distance. With a surge of hope, he pushed himself onward, his footsteps echoing in the night. As he emerged from the fog, Oliver saw the flashing lights of a police car, its siren wailing in the darkness. Relief washed over him as he collapsed to the ground, his strength spent. The officers rushed to his side, their voices a blur of concern and confusion. But Oliver could only gasp out fragments of his ordeal, his mind still reeling from the horrors he had witnessed. In the days that followed, Oliver tried to convince himself that it had all been a nightmare, a trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion and fear. But deep down, he knew the truth. Some mysteries were better left unsolved, some roads better left untraveled. And as he drove away from that desolate stretch of highway, Oliver vowed never to venture out into the night again. For in the darkness, there were things that lurked beyond comprehension, things that hungered for the souls of the unwary. And though he tried to put the memory behind him, he knew that the terror of that fateful night would haunt him forevermore. Kyle couldn't shake off the eerie feeling as he settled into his car for the long drive home. The late hour, coupled with the desolate road cutting through the dense forest, made him uneasy. But duty called, and he had to make this journey. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the narrow path ahead. Kyle's mind wandered, his thoughts drifting between the day's events and the comfort of his bed awaiting him at home. However, his reverie was shattered by a sudden movement at the edge of the road. Startled, Kyle slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. As the car screeched to a halt, he squinted into the darkness, trying to discern what had caught his attention. But there was nothing, just the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Shrugging off his unease, Kyle resumed his journey, chiding himself for being so jumpy. But as he drove on, a sense of foreboding crept over him, like an invisible hand tightening around his throat. Then, out of nowhere, a figure darted across the road, too quick for Kyle to react. He slammed into the brakes again, the tires skidding on the asphalt. Heart pounding, he peered into the darkness, his breath catching in his throat. But there was no sign of the figure, no trace that it had ever been there. Kyle's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. Something was terribly wrong, he realized, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. With a shaky sigh, Kyle pressed down on the accelerator, eager to leave this sinister road behind. But as he drove on, the feeling of unease only grew stronger, like a knot tightening in his stomach. Little did Kyle know, his night was far from over, and the road ahead held more than just darkness. As Kyle continued down the desolate road, a dense fog began to roll in, shrouding the path ahead in an eerie haze. His headlights pierced the mist, casting long shadows that danced across the trees. Unease gnawed at Kyle's insides as he navigated through the thick fog, his senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to morph into something sinister, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, a static-filled voice cutting through the silence. Kyle's heart skipped a beat as he listened to the garbled words, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the voice faded into static once more, leaving Kyle alone with his racing thoughts. But the encounter left him shaken, his mind reeling with unanswered questions. Determined to put some distance between himself and whatever haunted this road, Kyle pressed down harder on the accelerator, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. But the fog seemed to thicken with every passing mile, engulfing the car in a suffocating embrace. Just when Kyle thought he couldn't take it anymore, a faint light appeared in the distance, cutting through the fog like a beacon of hope. Relief flooded through him as he realized he was nearing civilization. But as he drew closer, Kyle's relief turned to horror. The source of the light was not a welcoming sight, but an abandoned gas station, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. With a sinking feeling in his stomach, Kyle realized he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. And as he stared at the derelict building, a sense of dread washed over him, like a wave crashing against the shore. Little did Kyle know, the horrors of the night were far from over, and the road ahead held more than just darkness. Despite every instinct screaming at him to turn back, Kyle felt compelled to investigate the abandoned gas station. With a shaky breath, he parked his car and stepped out into the cool night air, his footsteps echoing against the silent walls. As he approached the entrance, a chill ran down Kyle's spine, sending shivers cascading down his arms. The air was thick with a sense of unease, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. With trembling hands, Kyle pushed open the creaking door, the sound reverberating through the empty space. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the only light filtering in through the broken windows. Heart pounding, Kyle stepped inside, his senses on high alert. Every creak of the floorboard sent a jolt of fear coursing through him, every shadow morphing into something sinister in the dim light. As he explored the abandoned building, Kyle's mind raced with possibilities. What had happened here? Why had the gas station been abandoned? And what lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce? Then, just as he was about to turn back, Kyle heard a faint sound coming from the depths of the building, a soft whisper, barely audible over the sound of his own heartbeat. Heart in his throat, Kyle followed the sound, his footsteps echoing against the silent walls. With each step, the whisper grew louder, until it felt like it was echoing inside his own mind. And then, as Kyle rounded a corner, he came face to face with the source of the whisper, a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes gleaming with malice. Frozen in terror, Kyle watched as the figure stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. And as it drew closer, a cold dread washed over him, like icy fingers wrapping around his heart. Little did Kyle know, he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. And as he stood face to face with the darkness, he realized that the road ahead held more than just darkness. It held the key to a horror beyond comprehension. Kyle's instincts screamed at him to flee, but his body remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The figure before him seemed to radiate darkness, its presence suffocating. With a trembling voice, Kyle managed to choke out a question, his words barely audible in the oppressive silence. "Who are you?" The figure's lips curled into a malevolent grin, its eyes boring into Kyle's soul. "I am the darkness that haunts this road," it whispered, its voice like a venomous serpent coiling around Kyle's mind. Terror gripped Kyle's heart as he realized the true nature of the entity before him. It was no mere specter or apparition. It was something far more sinister, something ancient and malevolent. Desperate for escape, Kyle turned to flee, but the figure moved with unnatural speed, blocking his path with a wave of its hand. "There is no escape," it hissed, its voice echoing through the empty space. With nowhere left to run, Kyle braced himself for the inevitable confrontation. He had stumbled upon something far beyond his understanding, something that defied explanation. But even as fear threatened to consume him, A flicker of defiance ignited within Kyle's heart. He refused to let the darkness claim him, refused to become another victim of its malevolent grip. With a primal roar, Kyle launched himself at the figure, his fists swinging wildly. Blow after blow rained down upon the darkness, each strike fueled by sheer determination. And then, with a final decisive blow, the darkness shattered, dissipating into the night like smoke in the wind. Panting for breath, Kyle sank to his knees, relief flooding through him like a tidal wave. But as he looked up at the night sky, he realized that his ordeal was far from over. The road ahead was long and treacherous, filled with unknown dangers and hidden terrors. But Kyle was not afraid, for he had stared into the heart of darkness and emerged victorious. And as he rose to his feet, a sense of newfound strength filled his soul, guiding him towards whatever lay ahead. For Kyle knew that no matter what horrors awaited him on the night drive, he would face them head-on, with courage and determination. And as he drove into the darkness once more, he did so with a newfound sense of purpose, ready to confront whatever demons lurked in the shadows.